welcoming and give a really warm, loud Chicago welcome. Darren Aronofsky.
What do I do? Just say hello? Okay. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be back in Chicago. I guess I was last here with the wrestler, so it's been a while. I don't know. I can tap dance or I can answer some questions. Are we doing a Q&A afterwards?
Sure.
Oh, so I guess we can get into it then. You're like one of the first North American American audiences to see it. We showed it in Toronto, so that's cool. And all right, see you later.
Enjoy the film.
Thank you.
Hey, Darren. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, everybody. So let's get started with the origins. 10 years in the making for you. Saw the play, Samuel Hunter's play, performed originally in New York in 2012. What were the obstacles in getting this to the screen, and how much of it was finding the right Charlie?
That was the biggest challenge, was figuring out Charlie. When I saw the play 10 years ago, I was really moved by these characters that were very, very different from myself. And at the end, I felt how hopefully you guys feel now. And then I met with Sam, and Sam started to work on the screenplay, and we worked on it for a while. And but I just couldn't figure out the Charlie of it all. There was nothing that really excited me to get out of bed and fight for it. And then I saw the trailer to a low-budget Brazilian film, and Brendan was in it, and it was one of those aha moments. I hadn't thought of him, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea. And then he lived on the East Coast. Oh, that's us. And he came to visit me, and he was a complete gentleman and super sweet and clearly very hungry to take something on. And that's where it began.
So we'll get to more on Brendan in a moment, but was technology a factor? And obviously this is not a big special effects spectacle, but in terms of the digital sculpturing and the 3D technology you had to do, I mean, the Charlie we see here, in order to make him move as naturally as he does.
Living with obesity is often, well, it starts off with the characters. The characters themselves are often jokes or punchlines or evil characters, and they're not considered real human beings. And so the first question was like, is this at all possible? And he thought that there was just new techniques that made it possible. It was also, when we decided to really start to go, it was in the middle of COVID. So there was all those restrictions as far as how to create models and figuring. So we ended up using a lot of new technology to figure it out. But the second rule I gave to Adrian was I didn't want any of the makeup to in any way interfere with a single wrinkle or crease on Brendan's face, because I wanted him as an artist to be able to use his entire instrument. So basically the thing comes up and wraps around the side of his face, but everything is Brendan that you see, 100%. So, and there's very, very few, there's really no digital work, CGI work. There's some cleanup sometimes when, as makeup progresses during the day, you run into problems. But if you saw the makeup in real life, it was 100% convincing.
So how far did you actually get in terms of casting or trying to cast anyone else in this role? Did you screen test anyone?
Yeah, there wasn't really screen test. There were a lot of meetings. There were a lot of looking at tape. There was a lot of considerations. But no one really just excited me. And people have asked me about that decision, and I've talked about it earlier today for people that were in the master class, but I didn't even see much of his work. I'm not really a George of the Jungle fan, but I hadn't seen Gods and Monsters, where he did a dramatic turn. I hadn't seen School Ties, and there was just a gut feeling that there was something there that needed to happen. So I was discovering as much of it as I got to know Brendan over the course of making it as anyone was.
I'm not overly familiar with all of his 90s work either.
A lot of people are, though.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I discovered. I mean, it was, I would love to be able to say it was a calculation that I was gonna, everyone was wanting the Renaissance, but it was not, I mean, there's bumper stickers that say, "Have you heard Brendan Fraser is back?" So it's awesome. But I had no idea about the love for the human that he is. I just felt it was right, and this is all kudos that it's happening for him.
Well, he was never someone who, when I did see his films, I never thought of him as a small in stature, and he had a voice, if not booming, a big voice. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically here with this character is, in reflecting on the performance, I think so much about how he uses his voice and how there's an inherent sort of vulnerability to it and a quietness and a fragility that I think calls attention to his desire to connect with people. And is that something that struck you as well in casting him?
I like that. Not really. It was just unexpected. There's one moment in this whole kind of craziness that's happened. When we went to the Toronto Film Festival, he got this award for best performance or something, and me and Sam, the writer, presented him the award. And before they did it, they rolled a reel of his career, and it was mostly the films from the '90s, and then there were a couple of clips from The Whale. And that, to me, was like a staggering moment, just to see, because there is this purity and innocence that's in all those early roles that I think is what connected for people, because it kind of plays comedically, but I think there's a purity to that is Brendan. And then it's there again in Charlie, but in a much more rich, complex way. And it's almost impossible to believe when I was watching it that was the same human, but it is the same human. And I think it's exciting because he's suddenly this new actor and voice that so many people clearly love, and is because that's not, so, spoiler alert, but Brendan is not Charlie. They're no way related to each other, the actual human Brendan and the character Charlie. That's an acting job. So the potential of what Brendan is going to bring to the big screen and the little screen and all the screens is really exciting. As a fan now myself, I'm excited to see what he does.
I want to talk about the adaptation and the adaptation process. This is Samuel Hunter from the play, as we said, adapting it for the screen. It's as faithful, having read the play, it's as faithful an adaptation as I can think of, and I'm curious about that. That seems rare to me, that something is, in terms of characters, structure, thematically, dialogue, it's almost all there on the page. Why was that the right approach? Why did you feel like you had everything there to work with?
Sam talks a lot about this, that he was relieved when I said I didn't want to open it up, which would have been the natural thing, as Sadie in school or something like that. And I just always thought there was something really challenging about setting a film around the couch. My last film I reduced it to a house, so I figured I'd add to the challenge. But how do you make something cinematic that is so tight? And what's interesting when you watch a play, it's often like watching theater is almost like like a slice of a pie, because you're always looking at it from a direction. But when you make a movie, you can get inside the pie, and so that was really fun to figure out how to make it as dynamic as possible. And I mean, film is ultimately three things: it's camera, light, and performance at the core of it. I used to always say that. And so to reduce it down to those three things and to try to figure out how to use the camera and light precisely in every scene was a great exercise for me and my team, because during COVID, when things should be simple, we returned back to the basics.
Well, something that isn't replicable in the theater that you can do on film, obviously, because you're right, that's the impulse, is to want to expand it. A lot of times that's a criticism of movies that are adapted from plays, is to somehow make it bigger. This is all confined. But you're watching this, and the fact that you can utilize that that tool, which is the close-up. And so much of this film depends on these characters' faces. And I wonder too if that's the reason why you went to the 1:3:3 aspect ratio as well.
Yeah, so he's talking about the shape of the square. You might have noticed that it was like that shape. And we did that because the close-up was huge and the performances were huge and really important. But also, you shoot this widescreen when you're doing a spaghetti western and you're out shooting beautiful landscapes. Just getting more books on the left and right of frame didn't really do anything for us. And also, it's really, the characters are so separate in this because all the characters are kind of not, they're in their own world. So I didn't need to use the longer frame. So there were several decisions. The studio was a little nervous because they get pushback from international territories for sales, but it just felt like the right decision, and it really works for the framing.
I read where you said we wouldn't leave a scene unless we were spent. How does that?
That's always my thing. And what that just
How does that manifest itself on set?
It just, really, it sounds like everything is exhausting. It's not. It's just making sure that the actors are all satisfied, that they got everything that they want to try out. And for myself, all the different ideas, and for Sam Hunter, the writer who would be there, sometimes he would be like, oh, maybe there's a way of thinking about the words this way. So I wanted everyone to get a chance to bring it to the edit room.
One of the departures from the play is that Thomas is Thomas, and he's not Elder Thomas. I was wondering about that difference in terms of...
Yeah, in the play he was a Mormon.
Right.
And I felt like the Mormons had gotten enough crap over the years.
There's some baggage that comes to that for the audience.
Yeah, the Mormons are kind of the punchline, it was written before the Book of Mormon. And then when I talked to Sam, it turned out that Sam was involved with a more end-of-the-world cult than he was. The Mormons weren't part of his life. He's actually comes from something more like New Life. So I was like, oh, well, let's go back to something more connected to you. And Sam was super excited by that.
The character of Dan, if I recall correctly, the pizza delivery man, is an invention, which makes sense for that closing line, especially.
That's a great. So the pizza guy wasn't in the play, but what happened is right before we shot the movie, so Lincoln Center in New York shoots every single play that is up off Broadway and on Broadway, and has a library where you can actually view them. So we had been working on this. I hadn't seen the play in 10 years. We had been working on it, and I felt, oh, I should probably look at that just to see what that director did, or what the script was then, just to see. And I watched it. They opened up the library during COVID, and I watched it, and there's no pizza guy. And I was completely convinced the pizza guy was in the play. And I got out of there and I called Sam. I'm like, where's the pizza guy? What happened? Was this some weird thing where you cut it out? And he was like, no, that's like the first thing I wrote. And it's just, I could see it. I could see myself watching the play and seeing how the staging was, and the door open and the light, and I could see the guy half down. I was wondering how they did that in the play where they lowered him halfway down the step, because it would have been a stage. So I had this whole narrative in my head, and it was totally a false narrative. And I think that has to do with Sam's writing. His writing is so good. For me, I still watch, when I still watch it, I still get stuff out of the language. And there's so many layers to it. And the performances, because the language is so good, the performances have so many beautiful subtleties. Like, Sadie is at such a high, it's like everyone else is at, normal speed, and Sadie is at a super fast speed, and all of her emotions are super fast, and I'm still catching up to Sadie. I'm like, oh, wow, she did that too in that moment,
So, like I said, I think that line's important in terms of reinforcing the idea that Charlie expresses at the end about people being incapable of not caring. Another big departure is that final dramatic binge of Charlie's, which, it feels like appropriate for your work in terms of getting a sense of a lot of scenes I can think of where there's a pressure building, and eventually that pressure does burst, we get the hair, but also it is kind of that moment that peaks and we get the catharsis after that. And I feel like without it might feel a little inert. How did you and Sam work together on that?
Oh, I don't remember, to be honest. I didn't actually realize that's not in the play. Yeah, okay.
I didn't see it.
Okay. When did you see the play? You saw the play?
No, I didn't see it. I'm sorry, but I read it. I didn't
Yeah.
see it in the text. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it always was the exciting thing about the about making a movie is you can do stuff like the challenge to get the key, which you can't do that in a play. So suddenly, all these things that people in Charlie's situation have to deal with become incredibly dramatic. I mean, that's the chase scene in the movie, is trying to get the key. And in our research, we did a lot of research for it, and worked with this group called the Obesity Action Coalition, and got to meet a lot of people who lived with obesity or are still living with it, and through their stories, they definitely inspired a lot of stuff that was going on.
We're going to have a few minutes for a couple questions from the audience, so be ready. I have one more that I want to throw at you, which is, do you often rehearse before your films, before you shoot?
Yeah.
And was it any different on this one coming from
I
the play?
try to do as much as I can. It's such a great part of it, because one of my favorite things is working with actors and getting the time to explore the text, not when you're spending a lot of money on set with all these people waiting around. It's much better to do it beforehand. On this, 3 weeks before, we all met and taped out the set, and we didn't have enough money for doubles on the couch or anything, so we'd have to steal from the set and then return it. And we would get up and we would block every scene, and we worked on it like a play. It was Sam Morton, who plays Mary, couldn't make it because she was coming from England, and there were all types of COVID restrictions. And then so we used an actress that Sam brought, who had played Liz in the play. She played Mary, and we blocked it with her. And then when Samantha Morton showed up, Samantha is this unbelievable. It has to come from an incredibly truthful place, and the blocking was all wrong. And I started to curse under my breath, but then I knew that it would be the right thing to do, to just relax and let her find her place in the scene. Luckily, I had that experience, because she can only come from a place of truth, so she had to create the truth, and she improved the scenes that much better.
Let's get to some other truths out there. Right there in it looks like a gray, maybe hoodie. Yeah, go ahead, stand up, ask your question.
Yes, I absolutely love how you dramatize how someone chooses to live their last moments. And I'll just say The Wrestler, I think that's one of the greatest final cuts to black in cinema, and I felt a similar power here. What attracts you to exploring how someone chooses to go about living their last moments?
Should have done the Q&A.
I have to start with a hard question.
Yeah.
It's funny, like every single, it's been pointed out to me recently that all my heroes die at the end of every movie, except for Noah. But I wanted to rewrite the Bible, but I couldn't read the Bible, so I had to stick with that. He gets drunk, almost gets there. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's complicated because they're different in each movie, and they're all for different reasons. I guess The Wrestler has to do with putting on a good show and the glory of that type of thing. This one's all about giving something back to his daughter and giving her love. I think it seems like they're all, and I guess the Swan dies with, once again giving it all. I think it's probably about treasuring every moment and, following that through to the end. I don't know.
What else is there for Art to answer besides why are we here and what does it all mean, right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I guess. Yeah.
Let's do right there. Yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to say I really enjoyed the film. Kind of relating to this, I thought of Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, just a scene where Terry Jones is dressed up as someone of a similar stature. But anyway, to the question, I was rewatching some of your older films like Pi all the way up to the wrestler just this morning. And I want to just ask, what was, I know that's a lot of movies, but what is the one thing that's changed the most since first starting film, and what's one thing that's carried with you throughout your entire filmography?
God, hard questions tonight.
Tough, right? Chicago cinephiles.
They're usually much easier stuff. Why Brendan Fraser, like the big things. Look, I don't think the job changes too much. It's whenever you're trying to do something a little different, it's always hard to get them going. And then when you get them going, it's hard to balance the time limits you have and creativity limits you have and the money limitations you have. And it's still that same fight, no matter how big or how small they get. I still try, we have a lot of fun on set. We've always had fun on set. We're always just trying to be, that's why I work with the same people, Maddie, and sometimes Brendan would constantly be, Brendan tells a story about how when we smashed the computer, when he throws the computer, we were giggling behind the couch. He's heard all this laugh afterwards because we just loved the shot. And then we were like, how many more computers? And they were like, 7 more. We were like, okay, 7 more takes. So, I mean, we're sort of the same kids just playing around, having fun, and just trying to stay in the moment. So I don't think much has changed.
Couple more. Anybody got an easy one? Let's go. Hold on.
Yellow.
With it,
The yellow, everyone's pointing out.
sure, yellow. And then you know what? Four seats down. You get the next one from the yellow sweatshirt. See, I'm pointing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, yellow.
So this movie was really, it felt really personal, super intense, and I think the editing and the sound design was phenomenal. What part of the production process, pre, during, and post-production was the most personal to you?
It's interesting because it's Sam Hunter who wrote it. It's a very personal story. He's started to talk about that. I didn't actually know that much about it, but he actually, a lot of it comes from his own life. You could look up what he's talked about it. It's when it's not that personal, because the characters aren't me. I was very much probably like a lot of people in this audience. When you first sort of start, there's a lot of judging a book by its cover, and then you slowly start to go deeper and deeper, and you start to fall in love with all these characters, or at least understand where they're coming from and really relate to them. So I think the personal part for me is always in feeling what the performers are doing in the moment. So, but it's always that way when you're on set. Look, I'm not the wrestler, and I'm not the ballerina, and I'm not the drug addict. But you kind of, for cinema's this exercise in empathy. And the reason we all love movies is because they can transport you, and you can relate to characters that you may pass on the street and judge on the street, and then suddenly you really feel who they are. So, like the actors who have to play them and they're not them, they have to make believe that they're them. As a director, I'm watching them and just trying to feel what they're feeling and feel if it feels human to me. It feels like something I would feel. I try to feel the emotions all the time. So between action and cut, I'm just extremely focused on what they're doing and trying to make sure that their emotions relate to how I read the script and that it's all working. So it's just a constant feeling like that. When we call cut, we all make jokes or we all take care of each other. But then as soon as action and cut, you're just trying to think about where the audience is and empathize moment by moment.
You had your hand up right there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Last question. Go ahead.
So I'm curious, kind of as a creative and as someone who always kind of has another amazing, fascinating project coming up. Do you find that you have a backlog of ideas? It's like, oh, here's this a collection of things that you're really interested in working on that you have to decide between after each project. Are you developing the next thing while you're working on one project, or just completely in that world? Sorry, it was
Yeah, I get it. So yes, the answer is yes. This took 10 years to make, meaning it didn't take 10 years. I wasn't working on it for 10 years. I first got interested in it 10 years ago. And over the last 10 years, a version of the draft would come in, I would read it, I would consider it, and then I'd be like, oh, no, it's not quite right, I don't know the right actor. I almost produced it, like George Clooney wanted to do it for a little bit, and then Tom Ford wanted to do it, and we tried to make it happen, and then it didn't happen. And then eventually it became the right time to do it. So to answer your question, there's always a lot of projects. We have, I have some that have been around for 20 years and some that have been around for 20 months. And we just continue to work on them until one of them seems possible to get made. I wanted to make Noah since I was 13 years old. And then off of Black Swan, I realized someone might be crazy enough to give me $100 million to make it. So that's the game. You just keep them coming, and then when you find the right opening for the right one, and it feels right, it just sort of manifests itself.
Thank you for the movie. Thank you for your
Thank you,
time.
guys.
Darren Aronofsky, everyone.
Thank you, Chicago.